All right. So today we're moving on to 3.5, which is graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. This is the one you guys are more comfortable with. You did it a lot in the 8th grade math curriculum. So this one hopefully should feel like a nice review. Okay, so slope. If we have our equation y equals mx plus b, m is our slope. It's the rate of change between 2 points. Make sure you always write it as a fraction or as a whole number. Don't ever write it as a decimal or mixed number. Because if our slope tells us how far we have to go up and over to get to our next point, what does 3.2 tell me? It doesn't tell me much of anything. But if I have the fraction 5 over 4, it tells me to go up 5 and over 4. So it gives me a lot more information that's helpful when I'm actually using that slope to graph it. A lot of times you'll hear slope talked about as rise over run. Rise over run. That's the same thing as the change in your y's over the changes in your x. That's another way that slope is talked about. So rise is a change in your y, run is the change in your x. So slope-intercept form again is y equals mx plus b. B represents your y-intercept. We looked at how to find your y-intercept yesterday when we were talking about it in standard form. Remember, y-intercept, if it's in slope-intercept form, is the b. And then a constant function. So if you just have y equals some number, that's going to be a constant function. So if I just have y equals 2, y is equal to 2 right here, and y is equal to 2 all along that line. So a constant function is just going to be a horizontal line. All right, so slope, m, it's the rise over run, it's a change in y over the change in x, and this is the one that you have to make sure you know. If you're given 2 points and asked to find the slope between those 2 points, that's the equation you're going to be using. Okay, so talking about trends in slope. If it's increasing from left to right, it's going up, that's going to have a positive slope. If it's decreasing from left to right, it's going to have a negative slope. If it's a straight horizontal line, it is a slope of 0. And if it is a straight up and down line, a vertical line, the slope is actually what we call undefined. So you would not be able to say it has a slope. You would say the slope is undefined. And part of that reason is because you write it as the equation x equals some number. So there's no y equals anything in it, which means you can't have a slope. Can't be written in y equals mx plus b form. It does not have a slope. The slope is undefined. All right, so slope-intercept form, again, y equals mx plus b. M is your slope, and b is your y-intercept. So let's take a look at the first problem. It says to describe the slope of the line and then actually find the slope. So if the slope is going straight up and down, the description would be undefined. And it's a vertical line. So anytime it is vertical, anytime it's straight up and down, it's an undefined slope. And let's look at why it's undefined. Okay, so if I have my 2 points, my equation to find the slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is the coordinate point 3, 4, so that's going to be my x1 and y1. This is the point 3, negative 4, so that's going to be my x2 and my y2. So if I'm using this equation to find slope, I'm doing y2, which is negative 4, minus y1, which is 4, over x2, which is 3, minus x1, which is 3. So I end up getting negative 8 divided by 0. Go ahead and take a second in your calculator, type in negative 8 divided by 0. What does it give you? It gives you some sort of error message. It tells you undefined or error, can't divide by 0. You are not allowed to divide by 0. So if 0 is in the denominator, automatically you run into an issue, which is why we can say that this one is undefined. Okay, number 2, the slope is increasing as we go from left to right, so we would say it has a positive slope. And then to calculate the slope, we can count how far we're going up and how far we're going over, or we can use our slope form, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I'm going to count how far up, I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up and over 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is going to be 8 over 4, which I can reduce to 2. Okay, I caution you just counting on a graph because it's easy for the scale to have changed and not be counting by ones, and then just counting boxes will give you an incorrect error. If I were counting on number 3, how far up And how far over? I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 5 over 5. So it'd be really easy for me to say the slope is 5 over 5, which is just 1. But what kind of slope does this one have? It has a negative slope. If you're just counting, it is really common to leave off the negative anytime it's a negative slope. Whereas if you're using the formula will tell you that it's negative. So let's use the formula for this one. So I'm going to label my points as x1, y1, x2, y2, and then I'm going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 and simplify. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. 3 minus negative 2 is a positive 5. Notice it gives me that it is a negative 1 in my slope. So less likely to make mistakes if you're using this formula than if you're just counting. But again, as long as you're being really careful, counting is an acceptable way to do it. So if you're asked to find the slope of a line from a table, you're doing the exact same thing. You're going to find 2 points, and you're going to find the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I'm using these two as my coordinate points, that means my coordinate points are 1, negative 2, and 2, negative 2. So let's find the slope between them. So I'll label them as x1, y1, x2, y2, and then I'll do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So negative 2 minus negative 2 is 0. 2 minus 1 is 1. We can't do something divided by 0, but we can do 0 divided by something. 0 divided by anything is just 0. So our slope is 0. And if you were to visualize what this graph looks like, if y is always a negative 2, and your x's were going across like this, we know that our horizontal lines always have a slope of 0. So it matches what we've already learned. Okay, again, I'm going to pick any of these two. It doesn't matter which two I'm picking, but I'm going to label them as x1, y1, and x2, y2, and then use my formula. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So m is equal to 3 minus 11 is negative 8. Negative 1 minus negative 3, we can think of that as negative 1 plus a positive 3 would give me 2. So my slope is a negative 4. Again, notice I didn't have to worry about whether it's positive or negative as long as I'm doing my calculations correctly. If I had graphed the points, that would be another way to do it, and then I could count the rise and the run. Again, more likely to forget the negative if I do it that way, though. Okay, so for number 6, it says to find the slope and the y-intercept of the graph of the linear equation. Okay, so you can graph them by finding your x and your y-intercepts. For number 6, it's given to you in standard form. So you could graph them, but to me, if I'm going to be finding the slope and the y-intercept, I'm probably going to go ahead and just try to rewrite it and put it into slope-intercept form, which means I want to get y by itself. So if I subtract the 6x over, I'm left with 4y is equal to negative 6x plus 24. I went ahead and put the negative 6x first so that it's closer to slope-intercept form. Then I need to divide by 4, but if I divide that by 4, I have to divide every single thing by 4. So negative 6 over 4 can be reduced to negative 3 over 2. I keep the x on it, plus 24 divided by 4 is 6. So my slope I can write as negative 3 over 2, and my y-intercept or my b would be 6. Number 7 is super quick. It's already in slope-intercept form. So tell me what slope and y-intercept are, and hit pause, and then check and see how you did. All right, so my slope is negative 3/4. My y-intercept is 2, already in slope-intercept form. Remember, your slope is always the number attached to your x. The plus or minus the thing at the end, that's always your y-intercept. Try number 8. Okay, technically, number 8 has a plus 0 on it to see if that helps you. So my slope is going to be 5, and my y-intercept is going to be 0. All right, take a second and write your summary about slope-intercept form. How do you find slope from a graph? How do you find slope from an equation? How do you find slope from a table? How do you find the y-intercept from all three of those as well? And then how do you know the difference between slope-intercept form and standard form? So comparing it to yesterday's lesson, those would all be really good things to put in your summary now. All right.